Hey everybody, I'm taking another week off from the Quick Rui series, and this time I'm going to present you some really good stuff. This is quite a bit of analysis on the von Hennig Schara Gambit, which I've shown you guys, I think, from time to time, and this time I'll show some interesting new ideas. Okay, so this is the von Hennig Schara Gambit. Of course, if you want to play the Tarash, you can't play this gambit against knight f3. So if you're afraid of this with white, play knight f3. Anyway, knight c3, c5 takes. And there are various side lines along the way, but I'm just going to proceed to the main line here, which goes like this. Okay, and in the old days, and actually it's not really that bad, but in the old days they would always play a3 here to prepare b4. But for quite a while now, the immediate b4, simply sacrificing the pawn, has been more common. White is, of course, returning the material, the extra pawn that he's got, but aiming to again, blast open lines. With king's castled on opposite sides of the board, the standard type of plan, the standard strategy, is to attack like crazy against the enemy king, and opening files is certainly a good start there. Well, here the main move is bishop takes b4. But g4 is an interesting move that I had played against me some years ago, and since then I've investigated it from time to time and had generally pretty good results with it in blitz. I don't know that I would, well, I might play this in a tournament game, but certainly in blitz, it's fun and appropriate, and but by and large good things have happened. Now, if white plays knight to d4, then bishop takes b4 will simply transpose into the main line with bishop takes b4 right away by black. But b takes c5 is a very interesting and potentially challenging sideline, and this is in fact what I played when I first faced this. All right, although I have to admit, I simply didn't take the idea seriously for black, and only a few moves later did I realize, this could in fact be very, very dangerous. And I won, but it was kind of a scrap. It wasn't a simple win at all. All right, bishop takes f3, knight e5, and now. Here a move that I know I've discussed before is knight to d5, and there the main continuation is to take the bishop first, and then the knight, and then play rook h to g8 with some nice prospects there, and I think black is doing fine. But bishop to e2 is playable as well. I think, well, it's definitely a move that I've seen less often than knight to d5, but I have seen bishop to e2 from time to time as well. And here too, rook h to g8 is the move. And now, white has a choice between three moves. Queen c2, g3, and queen to b3. Of course, black is threatening to play both bishop to c6 and bishop to h3 here. So how would you react to this? What would be your choice here if you were playing white? So take your time and see what you can find. Okay, well, I'll say something by way of hints. They might be misleading, they might not be, but they're at least prima facie reasons for each of the three moves. For g3, you're simply avoiding, well, you avoid bishop to c6. You neutralize that, kind of, but it does allow bishop to h3 winning the exchange. So that leaves queen c2 and queen b3. Queen to c2, has the queen on a less exposed square, although with queen to b3 it's not really obvious how black could possibly take advantage of the queen being there anyway. So queen to b3 looks more aggressive. Queen to c2, it's not entirely clear what exactly the queen is doing on that square. Well, one possibility though is that maybe a queen on c2 could check on f5 in case of bishop c6. So that might be one good point behind it. Alright, so which of the three should white play? Well, let's look at all of these. Let's look at each move in turn. We'll start with queen to c2, which I think is probably, well, it may be the best move out of the batch. So here, black can win the exchange. Bishop to h3, g3, bishop takes f1, king takes f1. And here I think black's best move might be queen to d7, although I have to investigate this more carefully, but I suspect that this is probably the best idea. Now, materially, white is doing fine. So two bishops and two pawns for a rook and a knight. So it's approximate material equality, and it's really going to be a matter of whose attack comes first. Although one nice point about queen to d6 not only does the queen have the option of going to h3, which could be a pretty nice square, especially with the knight coming to g4, or to c6, but there's also the possibility of playing knight to d3, using this knight as kind of a wedge in the heart of white's position. So I think queen to d7 is pretty flexible. It also, of course, takes away queen f5. So this may very well be black's best. It's my suspicion, at any rate. But queen takes c5 is obvious, and this was played in, at the very least, in the correspondence game Alex Dunn against Dorel. And it was a 1999 game, and Dunn really should have won that game. So I'll give a few more moves. So bishop a3 was a very nice move. Queen c6, queen f5 check. Here, black could defend or could block with either the f knight or the rook. In the game, he played rook to d7. I think maybe knight f to d7 is. I'm not sure if it's better or not. It might be, but here too, white is better. So king g1 stopping queen h1 mate, king b8, knight b5, king a8, bishop d6 anyway, a6, knight c7 check, king a7, takes, takes, takes. Now it might at first glance seem as if black is simply winning here, but white has a little trick. Rook to d2. I'm not sure I said that right yet. It looks like white's winning, and maybe, well, he's definitely better, but black has this trick. Rook to d2, and then rook to c8, taking advantage of the knight. Yeah, notice you have to play the rook to d2 first, because if you play rook to c8, the knight just drops back to d5. So you need to keep one rook on the d file, and then have the second rook on the c file. So white has a little trick back, queen a5, and after some kind of mass liquidation like this, we have this interesting ending, where white's a pawn up, but black has a 2-on-1 kingside majority, and his king is already over there. Maybe black has okay chances to draw. I'm not positive just how bad this is. And of course, black can also keep the queens on, although I think white has the more attractive prospects here. Anyway, in either case, black is a bit worse. In the game, black played rook to d7, okay, king g1 stopping the mate, queen e6, and now queen f4, not trading queens. And pretty soon, black was in huge trouble. And in fact, I would say here, I mean, white is for sure just winning the game. So white let it slip away. I mean, he had several winning continuations, but eventually allowed black to get a perpetual. But at this point, this is really bad. So, you know, I don't think knight f to d7 equalizes here either. So really, I would recommend queen to d7. This position, I think, is still playable, quite playable for black. Maybe white has an edge, but I think to prove that really, I think is going to take quite a bit of analysis. Anyway, so that's queen to c2. So this, I think, is best, but it doesn't put black out of business in the queen to d7 line. Okay, line 2, g3. This was played in a couple of over-the-board games. Not super high level, but decent level of games. One between Volzhin, who I think is a GM. I'm not sure if he was a GM at the time, but he might have been, and Genba. And the other game was between, Ferenc Portish, who is Lajos's younger brother. Well, he's his brother. I'm not sure if it's younger or not. And a player named Truta. And in both cases, the more famous player, the more high-rated player had white. And in both cases, the higher-rated player with white lost, and quickly. So let's have a look. Well, one game was bishop to c6 here. The other game was queen e6. So queen e6 was the Volzhin Genba game. And here white played queen to d4, which is probably a mistake. So you should have played queen to d6. Then after queen f5, f3. Black doesn't seem to have any really good way to exploit this, the strange placement of the white queen. For example, if bishop to b5, well, this is easy. Knight takes b5 on account of this fork here. So knight e8 is probably best, covering d6 so that now bishop to b5 can be played. But still, white is up 2 pawns. Now, black has definite compensation, as the white pawn structure is relatively hideous, but whether it's enough for 2 pawns is unclear. So I think white still has good winning chances there. In the game, though, white played queen to d4, which is pretty logical. Bishop c6, queen f4, queen h3, and white has already lost. Okay, if he plays f3, then knight f to g4, starts collecting material. And if e4, well, again, knight f to g4, this is the game. Takes, takes, rook e1. And now the game concluded in a strange way. There's rook to g6, which is okay, queen f3. And then here, queen takes h2, check, king f1, rook to d3 is winning. But in the game, black played rook to f6, which was actually a serious mistake. Because after bishop f4, rook to d3, well, white resigned here, but he missed that he's in fact fine. Because queen g2, takes, takes, rook c3, and then h3. And thanks to rook to f6, if black retreats the knight, then he walks in a bishop to e5. So this is why this was a big mistake. Maybe rook takes f4 is better, but still, black is only slightly better, not winning. Alright, so as I said, rook f6 was unnecessary. The immediate queen h2 and rook to d3 just wins the game. While back here, also rook to d3 is winning. Anyway, so that was how the game went. That was Volzhin Genba. But again, instead of queen to d4, which was the game, queen to d6, and it's not clear that black has sufficient compensation. So let's turn our attention to bishop to c6. Now, that game saw the move queen to c2, but what about queen to b3? Well, this meets a very attractive refutation. In fact, yeah, queen to b3 might just be losing to rook to d3. Okay, the threat is to play knight to e4 if nothing else. Also, rook takes c3 is a threat. Obviously, white can't take the rook because of knight to f3 check followed by knight to d4 or knight to d2, discovering check with the bishop on c6 and then taking the queen. So, three possibilities here. I'll just mention quickly. If f4, which looks very logical, okay, if the rook moves, you take the knight. If the knight moves, you take the rook. Well, the problem with f4 is that g3 is weakened, and now black plays knight to h5, which is really an attractive move. So you got two pieces in pre. What do? You put a third one where it can be taken as well. But now the g file is coming into play. I believe if bishop takes h5, then probably queen to h4. Looks like it should do some damage here, and yeah, black has a winning attack here. Okay, if queen to b4, then rook takes c3. So let's look at rook to d1, which is at least, if anything, a slight improvement over queen to b4. Well, here, rook takes c3, queen c3, knight e4. And now what does white do? If he goes to a5, then queen f6, threatening queen takes f2 check, followed by knight takes g3, which is double check and mate. Alright, if rook to f1, then knight f3 check. Okay, if bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and there's nothing to be done to stop mate on h1 or g2 in a couple of moves, well, you can make it 3 moves, but you can't stop it. So king to g2, and now knight to c3, and white is collapsing here. So f4 looks like a better try, but now again, once the pawn goes up to f4, the g3 pawn is under protected, and black can simply can take advantage. So knight takes g3, hg, and now queen g6, putting the queen on the business end of the g file. Well, white can play queen to e1, but now it's kind of funny. Now we do this little stutter step over to h6. Now that the white queen on e1 has taken away a flight square from the king. All right, well, queen h1 check followed by queen to g2 mate is the threat, and actually, well, yeah, that's the threat. For a second I thought there was a second one. Maybe queen h3 is a threat too. And in fact, in case white plays e4, with the idea, I suppose, of meeting bishop takes e4 with bishop to g4 check, well, I'm not positive that that'll work either, but anyway, this is most simply met by queen to h3, which is winning. For instance, if rook to d5, then black just cleans everything out. Oops, sorry, and this is winning. So materially, black is up a little bit, and he's going to collect some pawns. At least, maybe more than that. So it's a winning position for black. Okay, so we were back here. We were looking at queen a5. All right, instead queen to d4 seems more sensible, but here too I think black can pull out a winning advantage. Queen to e6, headed for h3, of course. f3, and here not knight takes g3 anymore, although that might not be that bad, but because the white king can run out to e1, perhaps it's not going to be as effective. But knight to g5 is quite strong, threatening to win the queen by taking on f3. So queen d6, queen f5, and here white can try e4 or f4, neither of which is going to lead to happiness. So, okay, if f4, then knight e to f3 check, bishop takes, knight takes, king f2, queen h3. All right, clearly the threat now is queen takes h2 check, king f1, bishop to b5 check. This stops that, but knight takes h2 is simply winning as well. Threatening queen to g2, threatening knight to g4, threatening queen takes g3. Everything is bad for white. King to e2 makes more sense, trying to run away. Of course, if king f1, again, bishop to b5. And this is desperately bad for white. It's just getting mated quickly. So king d3, but then rook to d8 picks off the queen. All right, so back here we go. Okay, so after e4, we play, let me get back to this, knight g takes f3, bishop f3, queen f3, rook takes d4 is one idea, but now bishop e4, threatening mate on g2, takes and takes, and material is even, but the position is anything but. Knight to f3 is a decent threat, rook to d8 is, I think, the biggest threat, and white cannot hold this position together. If queen takes e5, then queen takes d1 check, king f2, queen c2 check. If the white king goes to the e file, for instance to e1, then rook to e8 will finish him off pretty quickly. So king to g1 is a better try. Bishop takes, threatening mate. And here white can really scramble to keep things together, but ultimately it breaks down. And it's kind of amusing. Bishop to d2, hoping for queen takes d2, queen takes e4. Black preserves his bishop, maintains the threat to the bishop, and of course the bishop can't move because of queen to g2 mate. So queen e2. Okay, rook to d8, piling up, rook to d1. And now, because the white queen is tied to the rook on d1, switching gears with rook to e8 is a pretty good move. Alright, queen to h5, queen e4, threatening mate once again on g2. Okay, check, here, rook f1, queen d5, threatening the bishop, and also clearing the e file so the rook can go to e2. Alright, bishop f4 check, king a8, a4, and this is simply testament to black's or white's inability to move anything. He's completely dominated here. So queen takes c5 check, starts collecting. Rook f2 check here, and of course you can just play rook takes f1, but the following is amusing. Queen d5, threatening queen h1 mate. Okay, queen h1, take. Obviously you can do anything you want here, but kind of a funny little sequence. Okay, so that was all with queen to b3. However, queen to c2 is a better choice here. So we got there again. So it was g3, bishop c6, let's see. Let me make sure I'm at the right spot here. Yeah, bishop c6. Okay, so instead of queen to b3, queen c2. Okay, and now queen to e6. e4, queen h3, bishop f4, knight e to g4, threatening mate, takes. And yeah, here if knight takes g4, then f3. And this, by the way, is the reason why queen to c2 is, or one reason why queen to c2 may be better than queen to b3. We'll come back to that later, though it's not exactly this variation that comes up. Now, in the game, his opponent played Truda played rook takes g4, which is a mistake. He should have played queen takes, and now I think the position is roughly equal. Bishop d6, knight takes e4. Okay, here if f3, then black equalizes. Well, it's a mutually interesting variation. So black plays knight to g5 here, with the point being f takes g4 runs into knight to h3 checkmate. So knight to b5 is an appropriate rejoinder right back. If bishop takes b5, then there's no mate, so white can take the queen. Bishop takes f3, check. Here, threatening rook e7 mate, rook d to e8, h4, and that's designed to give the white king another flight square out on h2. So queen to d4 check, And here, white should say no thanks to that flight square. So if he goes there, then takes, bishop to e4, and then knight f3 check is going to win material. So king f1, queen g4, threatening queen h3, and then queen to h1 in some cases. So king to g1, and this position is equal. Probably should just be a repetition with queen d4 check and so on. All right, so back here, instead of f3, white can play knight takes e4, bishop e4, queen c3, and here black probably has nothing better than queen f3. And this I think ought to be a draw. White can certainly push. He is up a pawn. The bishop on d6 looks nice, but black ought to be good too, with the opposite color bishops, and his own bishop being very good. Okay, well, in the game, black played rook takes g4, and now after queen to c1, black was in charge again. Or actually, this was a mistake. Yeah, this allowed black to equalize, but rook a to d1 would have black in trouble. So for instance, here, threatening to take on f4, queen d2 defends it, and this looks scary as well, but it turns out that white really is fine. Black has no way of kind of busting the white king. All he can do is scramble around hoping that there's going to be a perpetual or a repetition, but doesn't seem to be the case. And here it looks like white is winning. So he's managed to maintain his material advantage. He's shut down the bishop on c6, so the king can come to f3 or f1 and then g2. All right, so that's what could have happened. Of course, rook takes g4 is a mistake. So two back-to-back errors. Queen c1 was met by knight h5, and now bishop to e5 would equalize, but he played knight to e2. And now after rook d to g8, black was winning. f3, knight f4. And what does he do? If knight takes f4, then rook g3 is crushing. So queen f4, takes, queen h6. And white has rook and 2 pawns for the queen, but it simply isn't enough here. And white decided to throw in the towel. All right, so those are two of the variations. And now let's go back here and look at variation number 3, queen to b3. It seems hard to believe, but this loses by force. And it's not to bishop c6. Bishop c6 is an okay move, but it doesn't really quite get to the point. So the best move here is rook takes g2 check. King g2, rook g8, king h1. And once again, bishop to c6 is very tempting, but it doesn't win. White has a couple of adequate ways of meeting that. So try to figure out what the right way is. I mean, it's very pretty, the main line. Well, I think if you hadn't looked at the analysis that we had seen before, it would be much harder to find it, but given all the variations where knight f to g4 is played in the foregoing, you probably have a pretty good chance to have found it in this setting. All right, here white can try several moves. I'll give 3 options, none of which is adequate. We'll start with the least attractive one as far as the variations go. Bishop takes g4. So here, bishop takes g4, threatening bishop to f3 mate. All right, that gives white the choice between f3 and f4. If he plays f3, then you just take it. And now we're threatening rook to g1 mate. And now white is helpless against queen to h2 mate. And queen to e1 is also a strong threat too. So that was very simple. Okay, let's try f4 instead. Well, on f4, then we play queen to h4. And now the threat is to play bishop to f3 check, rook takes f3, and then queen to e1, followed by mate. And okay, so that's what would happen here. Okay, therefore bishop to a3, so the rook on a1 keeps the e1 square covered. But now queen to h3, threatening bishop to f3 check with mate and 2. Queen d5 stops that. But bishop to f3 turns out to be very strong all the same. And in fact, not only is black winning the queen, but he's still giving mate. So queen f3 is mate. Queen h2 mate is threatened. Queen g2 mate is threatened. And white can't stop it. All he can do is maybe play queen f5 check to drive the black queen back for a moment, but the white king is helpless. Okay, that was bishop takes g4. A more interesting try is queen to b4, hoping to bring the queen over to f4 in case of queen h4. But here, black interpolates bishop to c6 check. Now, if white holds his guns, or well, that's not the expression I want, but if he kind of holds firm, he sticks to his idea of bringing the queen to f4 by playing f3. Well, we'll see that bishop to c6 check proves useful anyway in its own way. Queen f4, and now knight f2 check. Okay, the threat's to mate on g1 or on g2, and so that pretty much forces queen to g3. But now, okay, black can win by just taking the queen, but the most efficient way to finish the game is with bishop takes f3, then queen to f1 check, and there's checkmate. Okay, that's what happens on f3. Well, how about e4? After all, the bishop from c1 can go to f4, right? No big deal. Well, queen h4, bishop f4, and now, trying to see if there's a second way. Well, at the very least, there's knight to d3, which is really quite a nice variation. What's the point? Well, let's start off with, well, okay, the threat's obvious. It's to take on f2 and give mate. Knight g takes f2, rook takes f2, knight f2 mate. Okay, well, how about we just take this knight? Well, now we play knight takes h2, which is a very, very slick move. The threat's just to move the knight back and give mate in a couple. Bishop to g3 is well handled by queen to h3, threatening again knight f3 mate. So that takes care of that. And if bishop h2, queen g2 is mate. Okay, and finally, if bishop takes h2, now queen h3. And this was the point of playing knight to d3. Before knight to d3, the bishop was on e2, and that covered the f3 square, so then white would have time to play rook to g1 now. So here he can't cover both squares. So rook to g1, queen f3, and then it's mate. Okay, well, going back to here, instead of bishop takes d3, well, what if white played bishop to g3? What do you about this one? So there's a nice solution. Might be more than one, but there's one that's clearly best, fastest, and most pretty. Queen takes h2 check. Only move is bishop takes h2, and then knight g takes f2. And there you go, checkmate. All right, and then finally, well, actually it's the same thing. So here, if instead of queen to b4, white plays the immediate e4, then similar play ensues. Queen h4, bishop f4, knight to d3, threatening the knight g takes f2, check, with mate next. Again, if bishop to g3, queen h2, finishes the job. And then finally, if bishop takes d3, once again, knight h2. And then queen here, check, and mate. Alright, so that's quite a lot of analysis. We probably don't have it memorized just yet, but I think this is, at least part of the basis of a good von Hennig Schara Gambit repertoire. It's not everything you need to know, but I think it is most of what you need to know about b takes c5. Alright, so you get to this position. I think you can reach this position relatively frequently in your games. Alright, you do need to know about knight to d5 here, of course, so I've mentioned that line before. And then perhaps again the crucial variation is queen to c2, bishop h3, g3, bishop f1, king f1, and now I would say queen d7 is the place to look and investigate. If that doesn't work, then black maybe has some problems in this gambit. Alright, so that's the key. I think taking on c5 is very risky and probably not good. Or at least the position that black gets isn't good. I mean, if the position black gets after queen to d7 isn't good either, it means that you have to, at the very least, go back here and not play g4, but play bishop takes b4. Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed that. Have fun, good luck, and if you play some cool games in this gambit, let me know. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.